Night highways operate under a different sensory framework than daytime roads. Between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., the acoustic environment of a highway changes completely. Traffic volume drops. Background noise from adjacent areas disappears. The hum of daytime construction, commercial activity, and residential movement stops. What remains is not emptiness, it's clarity. For people working night shifts on highways, maintenance crews, long-haul truckers, emergency responders, toll operators, this silence becomes a functional tool. Not a mood, not atmosphere, a tool. During the day, you rely on visual cues because sound is buried under constant noise. At night, sound becomes primary. The absence of it and the presence of it both carry meaning. This shift is not obvious to people who only drive highways occasionally at night. But for those who work them regularly, silence is not just noticed, it's used. And understanding how it's used explains why night shift road work follows completely different protocols than daytime operations. The first thing that happens when you start working night highways is you stop trusting your eyes the same way. Headlights create narrow tunnels of visibility. Streetlights, where they exist, cast uneven pools of light with long shadows between them. Reflective markers help, but only if you're moving. If you're stationary, setting up equipment, inspecting a surface, positioning a vehicle, you're standing in darkness with occasional bright spots that don't reveal much. So you listen. A truck approaching from a quarter-mile away is audible long before it's visible. The pitch of the engine tells you if it's accelerating or maintaining speed. The sound of tires on asphalt, wet versus dry, smooth versus damaged, gives you surface information without looking down. A vehicle drifting between lanes makes a specific sound as tires cross lane markers. You hear that before you see it. Night crews develop routines that assume silence as the baseline. Radio chatter is minimized. Conversations happen in short bursts, not continuous dialogue. Equipment is operated with attention to the noise it makes, because that noise either blends into the environment or stands out as a warning. Routine becomes rhythmic. Maintenance crews working on resurfacing or barrier repair move through tasks in a sequence that doesn't require verbal coordination. One person positions the truck, another sets up cones, a third readies tools. Everyone knows the order because the order is always the same. You don't discuss it, you just do it. And in silence, you hear if something is wrong, a tool dropped, a cone tipped over, a vehicle approaching faster than expected. Long-haul truckers develop a similar rhythm inside their cabs. The engine noise becomes white noise. The radio stays off or plays low. Windows stay cracked even in cold weather because outside sound matters. You're listening for changes, road surface, wind direction, another vehicle in your blind spot. Silence inside the cab means you're hearing what's outside the cab. Toll operators and way station attendants work in structures that amplify sound. A vehicle rolling up to a booth is heard before it's seen. The way brakes are applied, smooth or sudden, tells you if the driver is awake and alert or struggling. Silence between vehicles is normal. It's expected. That silence gives you time to reset your attention before the next interaction. Fatigue is always present at night. Everyone working these shifts knows this. You don't fight it directly. You manage it through routine. Routine reduces the need for active decision-making. Routine means you can operate effectively even when you're tired because the tasks are automatic. Silence supports this. Noise requires interpretation. Silence is the absence of new problems. Decisions made at night are made with less information than decisions made during the day, but they're often made faster. This creates a specific kind of pressure. During the day, if you're uncertain about a situation, you have options. You can observe longer. You can call for a second opinion. You can wait for better visibility. At night, waiting often isn't practical. Traffic is lighter, but it's moving faster. Vehicles appear suddenly. Conditions change quickly. Hesitation compounds risk. So night workers prioritize speed of recognition over depth of analysis. A maintenance crew supervisor sees a vehicle approaching their work zone. Daytime protocol might involve assessing the vehicle's speed, checking if warning signs were visible, confirming the crew is positioned safely. Nighttime protocol is faster. Check if the vehicle is slowing. If not, get the crew out of the lane. That's the decision. No extended evaluation. Long-haul truckers make constant micro-decisions about lane position, speed, and following distance. At night, these decisions rely heavily on sound. You hear an engine revving behind you. You check your mirror and move right. You hear gravel crunching under your tires. You correct back toward the center of the lane. You hear your own engine straining. You downshift before the grade gets steeper. These aren't conscious deliberations. They're responses to auditory input that happens in silence, so the input is clear. Emergency responders working night highways face compressed decision windows. A crash scene at night has fewer visual reference points. You can't see skid marks clearly. You can't immediately assess where debris has spread. But you can hear if traffic is approaching, if another vehicle is involved but out of sight, if fluids are leaking onto the road. Silence allows you to gather this information quickly. Noise, sirens left running, multiple people talking, radios at high volume, buries that information. What workers prioritize at night is not comprehensiveness. It's speed and confidence based on limited but reliable cues. What they deliberately ignore are ambiguous details that require extended observation. If something looks unusual but doesn't sound wrong, they leave it. If something sounds wrong, they act immediately even if it looks normal. This inversion of priorities makes sense in low-visibility environments where auditory information is more reliable than visual information. Hesitation is costly at night because reaction time for everyone, the worker, other drivers, equipment operators, is compressed by limited visibility. If you delay a decision waiting for perfect information, the situation often worsens. A vehicle that could have been flagged down safely speeds past. A crew member who could have moved out of a lane is now caught in position. A surface defect that could have been marked becomes a hazard. Night shifts reward decisiveness based on pattern recognition, not thorough analysis. There are rules for night highway work that no manual explains because they're based on sensory adaptation, not procedure. The first unwritten rule: never assume another driver sees you, even with lights and reflective gear. You assume they don't. You position yourself accordingly. You move as if invisible. This sounds pessimistic, but it's not. It's realistic. Night drivers are managing their own fatigue, limited sight lines, and speed. They're not always processing warning signals the way daytime drivers do, so you don't rely on their awareness. You rely on your own positioning. The second rule: sound is directional, but direction can be misleading. On open highways, sound bounces. A vehicle approaching from behind can sound like it's approaching from the side. Barriers, embankments, and overpasses distort audio cues. Experience teaches you to verify sound with sight before acting on it, but also to trust sound as the earlier warning system. You hear first, then confirm visually, not the other way around. The third rule: silence after noise means something changed. If you're working near traffic and you hear vehicles consistently, then suddenly you don't, that silence is a signal. Maybe traffic stopped upstream. Maybe there's an obstruction. Maybe someone closed a lane without informing you. Silence is not neutral, it's an event. You investigate it. The fourth rule: fatigue is managed through environmental engagement, not stimulation. Workers who rely on caffeine, loud music, or constant radio chatter to stay alert often crash harder when those supports are removed. Workers who stay engaged with environmental sound, listening to the road, the wind, the equipment, maintain steadier alertness. Silence doesn't make you sleepy if you're actively listening to it. The fifth rule: communication at night is minimal and specific. Long explanations don't happen. Instructions are short. Confirmations are brief. Move the truck. Cones are set. Traffic coming. That's the level of exchange. Silence between these exchanges is normal. It's not awkward, it's efficient. Talking more than necessary introduces noise that buries useful sound. These rules are never written down because they're experiential. You can't teach someone to interpret the silence after noise without them experiencing it. You can't train someone to trust sound over sight without them working multiple nights where sight fails and sound doesn't. Instruction can explain the concept. Experience teaches the application. Why experience matters more than instruction on night highways is because the sensory framework is inverted from daytime norms, and inversion isn't intuitive. It's learned through repetition. New workers on night shifts often over-rely on visual confirmation and underutilize auditory cues. They're slower to recognize patterns. They hesitate more. Over time, they adapt. The adaptation is mostly unconscious. You don't decide to start trusting sound more. You just do because it works. When routines that prioritize silence are followed, night highway work becomes measurably safer and faster. Crews that maintain quiet protocols report fewer near-miss incidents with approaching traffic. The reason is straightforward. They hear vehicles earlier and have more time to react. Crews that allow constant radio chatter or equipment noise running unnecessarily report more close calls. The noise floor is higher, so warning sounds arrive later. Long-haul truckers who operate in relative silence, minimal radio, windows slightly open, attention on environmental sound, report better lane control and fewer fatigue-related errors. They're not fighting to stay awake through stimulation. They're staying engaged through active listening. That engagement sustains alertness more consistently. Emergency responders who establish quiet zones at night crash scenes report faster scene assessment and better coordination. When only necessary communication happens, every instruction is heard clearly the first time. Repetition is rare. Confusion is minimized. When these routines are ignored, the consequences are usually inefficiency rather than disaster, but the inefficiency accumulates. A crew that doesn't hear an approaching vehicle repositions late, which delays the work. That delay extends the shift. Extended shifts increase fatigue. Fatigue increases error rates. The chain of consequences is predictable. A trucker who drowns out environmental sound with loud music or talk radio misses auditory cues about road surface, weather changes, or nearby vehicles. They rely entirely on visual input, which at night is limited. They correct problems later than they would have if they'd heard them earlier. Later correction means sharper maneuvers, harder braking, more stress on the vehicle. An emergency responder working a night scene with radios at high volume and multiple people talking misses the sound of an approaching vehicle that didn't see the scene. That vehicle gets closer before anyone reacts. The reaction is now rushed instead of controlled. None of these are dramatic failures. They're small degradations in operational effectiveness, but night work operates on narrow margins. Small degradations matter more at night than during the day because there's less room for error and less capacity to recover from mistakes. Silence isn't treated as a preference or a cultural norm in night highway work. It's treated as a functional requirement. When it's maintained, work flows smoothly. When it's not, work becomes harder without anyone necessarily understanding why. Night highways don't reward the same behaviors that daytime highways reward. The priorities shift. The sensory hierarchy inverts. What's background during the day becomes foreground at night. What's clear during the day becomes ambiguous at night. Workers adapt to this by changing how they gather information and how they make decisions. Silence becomes a medium, not an absence. It carries meaning because sound carries meaning, and sound is only interpretable when silence provides contrast. These patterns make sense only from inside the work. Explaining them to someone who hasn't worked night highways often sounds overcomplicated or unnecessary, but everyone who works these shifts understands it immediately. The understanding isn't intellectual, it's practiced. Silence matters on night highways because the alternative is operating with less information, slower reaction time, and higher cognitive load. That's the trade. It's not philosophical, it's mechanical. And the work continues, night after night, in the same rhythmic quiet that makes it possible.